Everyone, I'm Gautam, aka the Seeker of Wisdom. I'm a manifestation coach, and in this video, we're going to be talking a little bit about whether or not you should be taking any active actions towards your desires. Now, before I do so, I'd like to remind you guys I am available for coaching, so I offer hourly, monthly, email, and DM coaching along with premium coaching right now, which is basically unlimited calls and unlimited DMs. So the links for that will be in the description down below, where you'll have access to an FAQ page where you guys can find all the answers you need, and thereafter you guys can reach out to me via Instagram or email for pricing information and to figure out what plans may be suitable for you. I also have a Facebook group where I upload resources from time to time, as well as you guys can ask me questions anonymously if you wish to do so. And I also have a mailing list where I post articles from time to time, as well as my latest offers for coaching. And last but not least, I also have a Manifest Your SP course, which is now bundled with Remove Your Third Party course. And the Remove Your Third Party course is also being sold separately as well, which is a mini course focused on, as the video says, as the title says, removing your third party, because a lot of people have been requesting specific topic courses, mini courses which they can do as well, if the SP course is something that's too big for them. So this course is going to basically help you to really come at this from a very concentrated approach. So what I have done is that I've also included the remove your third party course onto the main Manifest Your SP course as well. So I'm not going to be selling the Manifest Your SP course as a separate thing anymore. It's only going to be bundled with Remove Your Third Party course. And it's a lot of content right now. There's about, I think, 51 lessons to go through. So a lot of people have been asking me, why is there so many lessons there, and why is there so much content? And essentially I break things down, right? I go from the basics and all the way to like different and specific scenarios and so on. So what's going to happen with the Manifest Your SP course, guys, is that I'm going to be adding so much more content, and the prices are going to be bumped up accordingly as well. I bumped up the prices recently as well with as I added new things and whatnot into the Manifest Your SP course, and I'm going to be bumping up again really soon. By the time I post this video, I might have already done it, but I'm going to be bumping up the prices even more as well. And the reason for that is that I'm adding more content, and I'm adding it's essentially I've added a mini course into it as well. So if you have purchased it in the past, you will get those updates for free. That's the neat thing, right? So I'm going to be adding more, and you're going to be getting it at a bargain, right? If you buy it right now, because all the other updates in the future, you're going to be receiving it for absolutely no cost at all. So it's definitely a great deal. So definitely look into it, guys. So without further ado, let's get to it. Sorry if I'm holding my phone here, because I almost dropped it right before the recording session. So I'm kind of like adjusting the knots, making sure that it's all tight and whatnot, because I don't know, I just want to make sure that the phone doesn't it just slid from the entire stand. Stop my heart for a bit there, but it's all good now. But anyways, so I want to talk about whether or not we should be taking action towards our desire, and essentially talk about the topic of inspired action, right? Like, where does it come from? And I want to give my thoughts on it. So inspired action, it's a law of attraction thing, right? So essentially, okay, you have your desire, and then you have the end, right? And then what do you do in the middle? That's where law of attraction kind of fills it up with inspired action, right? You essentially you get signs, maybe something stands out to you, or there's some sort of a synchronicity, and you just feel inspired to reach out to someone or talk to someone, and then things kind of flow from there. That's kind of like the general idea when it comes to this. um, with law of assumption, however, Neville made it so simple. That's why I love Neville. Really, he always makes it so simple. One thing that I really liked about law of assumption was Neville said it in the most simplest way possible, right? He said something along the lines of, your free will ends in your mind, right? So when we talk about free will and all that kind of stuff, it ends in our mind, right? So what happens in the 3D is not even in our control, right? Like, we have the free will to choose our desires, right, in our mind, but free will ends in our mind, right? We don't bring it in the 3D. So regardless of whether we do something or not, essentially you are still going to face certain things in life based on your thoughts, right? Your dominant thoughts. So there's no such thing as inspired action when it comes to law of assumption, or at least based on Neville's teachings, because free will ends in your mind, right? So how can you have, whether or not you like do your quote unquote inspired action, regardless of not whether or not you carry out that, you're still going to get your desires, right? So let's talk about it from the perspective that probably everyone is dying to hear right now in this moment, right? Which is manifesting it from manifesting your SP basically, right? So essentially, like when it comes to that, let me just take a sip of water. Sorry, I'm making videos back to back right now, so my throat is like definitely out. So hope you guys don't mind that. Anyways, so when it comes to manifesting your SP, right? Like a lot of people have this kind of question. Even my clients do all the time. Is should I manifest? Should I reach out to my SP? Sorry, right? In the process of manifesting them, should I let them come to me? Right? Like what do I do? Should I drop them a text? They are not texting me, and so on and so forth. Right? Coaches mostly, like most coaches in this space, will always have this like kind of hard rule which is like, no, don't reach out, right? Like, and there's very good reason for that, honestly, because people who are manifesting SP, and this is I'm vaguely and I'm really generalizing here, right? Especially if you're new to this space, if you are just getting into it just for the sake of manifesting your SP, one thing I've noticed is that when it comes to things like SP, for example, people are very volatile. People are very, very, very volatile, right? Their emotions are running high, and sometimes there's you know self-control issues, in the sense that like people don't really kind of hold themselves back and think, okay, is this the right way to go about this, right? That kind of self-control is absent in their lives, and they will just go right and just text stuff, call them, and sometimes it can also result in them getting blocked by the ISPs, right? And so for this reason, like coaches, like some coaches, right, have this hard and fast rule of, okay, you know what, prevention is kind of better than cure kind of method. So like they kind of completely shut that whole thing off by saying, don't reach out to your SP, don't do this in the 3D. And even like a lot of my clients will come and tell me that, like, hey, don't be mad at me, I reached out to my SP, sort of thing. And for me, it's like I don't like tell my clients like what to do or what not to do, but based like on a case by case basis, like I would definitely strongly advise them maybe not to reach out. And some people like will reach out despite against my advices sometimes, right? And and then they will be like, okay, you know what, you were right, because XYZ happened, right? Like they weren't giving me the favorable reply, right? And I'm not saying like it's not like a aha, you see I'm right kind of moment there, but it's like I kind of already know, because I've seen this in a couple different permutations before, and that is why it is recommended, right? But there are certainly times when I have told my clients, listen, you can do whatever you want, go for it, right? Like I have told my clients that too. And so I want to really talk about where does that happen, and what makes the big difference is your thoughts, essentially, right? The clients who I tell like, okay, you know what, go for it, dude, like just do it, like just go and talk to her type of thing, right? With my male clients, I've done that before as well. And the only reason I say that to some is because their thoughts are favorable, right? Like they come at it from the perspective, okay, regardless of what I do, I know my desire is already mine. The problem is that most folks can't reach like their reach out to their SPs from that perspective, right? Like that perspective that, okay, regardless of what I do, right, SP is already mine, right? So I'm just going to go for it, right? Because I already know the end, right? They don't come at it from that level of confidence. They come at it from a place of fear, right? Lack. And that's when it's not ideal to reach out to the SPs, and that I stand by that, right? If you're coming from a place of lack and fear and whatnot, it's better not to reach out, right? It's better not to do things, because regardless of what you do, right? Even if you type the most perfect of text messages, Even if you call at the most perfect of times, trust me, it will blow back on your face, right? You can have like 10 different wingmen, like, making sure and editing all the paragraphs that you're about to send to them, but trust me, like, it's not going to work out for you because your underlying thoughts there are unfavorable. So essentially, my point is the actions don't matter, it's the underlying thought that matters the most. And if you can master that, you can do anything that you want. And this isn't just something that I say, this is something that Neville talks about as well. I was just listening to a recording earlier. I think it was The Secret of Imagining, right? And he was talking about a friend who would smoke in planes, right? Like that. I think this was back in probably the 50s or 60s, which is really wild because we know that that just doesn't happen, right? Like, and he would just do it because he knew like he's going to be fine, right? He didn't do it like the way Neville said it was he wasn't doing it as a rebellious act or whatsoever, but it was just like he was just doing it because he wanted to. He just wanted to smoke, and he knew he wasn't going to harm anyone, type of thing, which is a very powerful place to come at it from, right? So he knew he had that thought, that strong thought there. So regardless of what he did or he didn't, like no one was going to bother him, right? He knew that he came from a strong place, right? Neville's friend came from a very strong place. So it's that really, right? It's not the actions, it's the underlying thought that matters. So regardless of whether or not you do something, the outcome is already yours, if you assume the best, right? Like think about Neville's army story, for example, right? Like he was drafted for World War II. I think it was in the age of like 38, I believe, and he uh, was in a camp in Louisiana, I believe, and they disapproved his letter, right? When he was, I think he wanted to get out of the army, but there was an option for that. But at the end of the day, though, I believe the final say was up to the commanding officer of that. I think I don't think it's a platoon. It's probably bigger than that. But anyways, um, yeah, it always fell to the CEO, right? So when it did, though, Neville's CEO said no, right? It was a colonel, and the colonel said no. And when Neville didn't do anything. He didn't protest. He just went back. He just imagined. And then 9 days later, the colonel himself called Neville, and he like did all the necessary things for him to get discharged from the army. And it's an honorable discharge, right? It's not a nothing dishonorable there. It's an honorable discharge. So my point is this, right? Like he didn't take any action towards that. Like, I mean, he did what he had to, right? Like he sent a formal application and everything, but initially they disapproved it. You get what I mean? But when he assumed otherwise in his mind, like it just happened, right? And the same thing how he manifested in SP, right? Like he was in a marriage and things like that, and that was a potential obstacle, right? His wife came into town. She got caught for stealing stuff, and we all know how that story went, right? Again, what influence did Neville have there, right? So regardless of whether or not you do something, your desires are always going to come to you, right? You don't have to do something in order for you to get your desires in any way, right? But having said that, if you do feel like reaching out, right, like what I would say is that definitely take a look at the quality of your thoughts. Are they favorable, right? Especially with things like reaching out to your SP, it's like, okay, regardless of how that conversation goes, do you have the emotional strength and maturity to say that, okay, regardless of what happens in this interaction, SP is already mine? Or are you hoping for something here? And that is a conversation, that's a question that you have to ask yourself, that you have to talk it through in your mind, right? And I mean, you can go and reach out and find it for yourself, like find out for yourself, like how it may pan out, right? Like if it blows back in your face and if you feel hurt, that means your underlying thoughts weren't favorable. It's as simple as that, right? And if it goes well for you, that means your underlying thoughts, whether or not you had it consciously, was favorable. So if you come at it from that perspective, like it's very easy for you to gauge whether or not you should do something in the 3D, right? That's the only thing that I always use to kind of gauge if I want to do something or not. Is, okay, is my underlying thoughts favorable here? If it's a yes, great. But if it's a no, then I'll pretty much you know take a step back and just kind of hold on and change my thoughts first, and then before I do something, right? But like whenever I do something these days, like I always make sure that like my underlying thoughts are always favorable, because then what I'm essentially doing is ensuring that 9 times out of 10 my outcomes are always favorable, right? So that's something that I always do to kind of ensure that, okay, regardless of whether or not I do something, I make sure that my underlying thoughts with regards to that is favorable. And when it's favorable, things always go smoothly for me. And that is something that I ensure, right? So it's not a question of whether or not you should reach out. It's more of a question of where are your thoughts at? Are they, of quality? Are they in alignment to your desires, right? And if it is, guess what? Regardless of what you do or you don't do, you're still going to get to your desires. Maybe that very thing that you're doing right now is leading you towards the fulfillment of your desires. Maybe not in the way you expected, but maybe it's an unexpected way. So, just go with the flow, right? All you have to do as a conscious creator is assume the best and sustain it. That is where routines come in, right? That is where all your techniques and everything comes in, right? And so if you can maintain that, that is all you have to do. All that is required of you is to hold on to that belief, right? And I know we have been programmed otherwise, but this is the point of the law, is to tell you otherwise, right? It's to unlearn all those like old limiting beliefs, and to ingrain the idea that not a finger has to be lifted. What does that actually mean? It means you're not consciously doing anything. Make no mistake, this is an action oriented world. You are going to do some action, but the key thing there is you're not going to realize at that moment that those very actions are going to lead you to the fulfillment of your desires. That's where you will not like know, right? Whereas when you are doing something in the 3D, right, like sometimes, like before you learn the law, for example, you would have done something expecting an outcome, and depending on the quality of your thoughts, it may or may not have panned out in the way you wanted it to, right? So that's the key difference there, right? And in this one, like in law of assumption, what we are essentially saying is that, okay, whether or not you do or you don't do anything, you're still going to get your desires, because the circumstances are going to push you towards that, towards the fulfillment of it, right? Maybe you're forced to leave your home and like do something, and then that will lead you to your desires to get a new job that you always wanted, right? Like Neville always says, right, I wouldn't bat an eye if you tell me you wanted a raise in a job, but you were fired the next day, because maybe that's what had to happen in order for you to get a raise, right? So this also applies for other people, right? Like if you want to help someone, imagine them, put them in that state where they are already have their wishes fulfilled for them, right? And Neville had a couple stories on this too, right? Like a barber who wanted his own shop. He loved that his craft and whatnot, and then this guy just imagined him to be a wealthy shop owner or something. The guy who was getting his hair cut, and essentially that barber went on to win a couple different competitions, and then I think he opened up his own shop or something like that, right? So this man decided to put him in that state, right? And there was another story where Neville's student, who was also spreading the law of assumption, essentially went around. At one point, one guy was trying to ask money for like to buy alcohol or something like that, and then that friend like refused, but he said something along the lines of, but I'm going to give you something, or something like that, right? And then what happened was he imagined him, right, to be gainfully employed or something like that. And then I think a week later, this man came to him, and he crossed the road and came to him, and he's like, I don't know if you remember me. He said, yes, I remember you. And he said, I'm so glad you didn't help me out that day, because then I went to find a job or something like that, and I was taken and things like that, right? So Neville's friend, or student, I should say, like put him in that state, right? So these are things, these are ways, like you can help others by not even lifting a finger, right? Like we are always told, right, like, okay, to kind of help people, you need to do XYZ in the 3D or something. But no, all you have to do is just imagine them being in that state, and everything else will come, right? It doesn't have to come through you, right? But it will come through some way. right? But at the end of the day, in your reality, you are the cause for their prosperity. They may not know it, right? Not that they should know, or not that they should, praise you for that because you decided to do it. But at the end of the day, it was your doing that caused it. In the 3D, they may have a number of different reasons, but make no mistake, it was still you in the end, right? So Neville was talking about a friend who had appointments with him. Basically, it was like almost like a client like arrangement, right? So her son came from Egypt with like a full beard apparently, right? And she was like, I'm kind of embarrassed to kind of walk with him. I can't walk with him with like that whole beard on Fifth Avenue. So I assume this was in New York. So essentially, what Neville told her was, okay, in your mind, like touch his cheeks or something, and then like give him a kiss, right? Because that's what you would do if you if he didn't have a beard, right? Like that's what you would do, right? And then she said, yes, that's what I would do. And then like she asked her to imagine it, and basically I think a couple weeks later he saw that dude on the paper or something. That was a wedding, and this dude was getting married, and the friend, Neville's friend, was there, and things like that. It was a big wedding photo, I guess. And long story short, so Neville met her down the line, and he asked her like, okay, so what did you do? Type of, like, I want you to tell me what did you do, type of thing, right? Like, I know why it happened, but I want you to kind of explain it to me. And she was like, oh, because the girl he was getting married to said like she's not gonna marry him or something if he doesn't take his beard off, right? But he said, no, that's not the cause. Remember what you told me, right? Like you told me you would actually touch his cheeks and kiss him if like he already had removed his beard, right? Like, that's what you would do. You imagine that. That's the cause, right? It was not the girl telling him, the bride telling him to remove his beard, but rather it was the imaginal act. Because remember, free will ends in your mind, right? So even though 3D, in the 3D, there might seem like a cause that kind of shifted you to get your favorable outcomes, make no mistake, it was just the bridge. The original source is in your mind, right? And that's not just for others, for manifesting others, it's for you as well. Everything, right? The bridge of incidents will unfold in such a way that when you kind of look back, you'll be like, you know what, it makes sense because XYZ had to happen and then I got my desires. But no, right? The reason why XYZ happened in the way it did, and in perfect alignment or in tandem, I should say, the reason why it happened the way it did is because you first saw it in your mind, and the bridge just unfolded perfectly for you to get your desires, right? So in some cases, like it may seem like a coincidence, but it's never a coincidence, right? Like what Master Oogway says in Kung Fu Panda, right? Like it's like there are no coincidences. So essentially, that's what it is all about. Free will ends in your mind. So as long as you maintain a favorable quality of thoughts, right, regardless of what you do or you don't do, you're still going to get your desires. So I don't want to confuse people. I don't want to sound controversial, but this is essentially what it is, right? So before you guys like freak out or like like spiral into anything, I'll say this, right? Like I'm not going to respond to any comments which like kind of asks me this, right? So that's why I'm kind of putting this in the video right now. Don't ask me like put like specific scenarios and be like, okay, what do you think I should do? Should I reach out or not reach out? Like I'm not going to decide that for you, firstly. Secondly, simply ask yourself, is the quality of your thoughts, like what are the, like how are your thoughts basically, right? Is it favorable or is it unfavorable? Are you coming from a place of love, which is loving thoughts essentially, or are you coming from a place of fear, which is fear-based thoughts? You know the answer to that. And if it's fear-based, then it's preferable that you don't, because the outcome may not end up favorable for you. But if you're coming from a place of love, then by all means do whatever you want to, because it always, whenever, you can never go wrong when you come from a place of love, right? Everything will always be favorable for you. So that's the kind of general rule of thumb there. So guys, that's it. So if you guys have any questions besides the one that I just stated, right? Like if it's any other thing, or if you want to just expand on it, feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Be sure to like if this video resonated with you. Turn on the bell notification so that you guys will know when I upload a new video every single week. And be sure to subscribe, guys, as it goes a long way for me. Do check out the causes, especially if you are looking to manifest your SP or removing your third party. And so yeah guys, thank you so much for all the love and support that I'm always receiving. I really appreciate it, and I want you guys to know that I don't take it for granted, and we are reaching 1K subscribers really soon. I'm really excited. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and happy manifesting. Peace.